Welcome to Building the Blueprint, a podcast from ConnectOne Bank, where we help business owners lay the foundation for success. I'm Frank Sorrentino, Chairman, Founder, and CEO of ConnectOne Bank. Before I was a banker, I was a builder, and I spent the first half of my career growing my business. When I couldn't find a bank that truly understood what business owners needed, I decided to build one. Now, after 2 decades of building ConnectOne Bank, I want to share some insights to help others in building their business. In each episode, my team and I will break down economic shifts, government policies, and financial trends, translating complex business topics into clear insights so you can build smarter, move faster, and stay ahead. This is your blueprint for building something better. So let's get to work.
Welcome to episode 4 of Building the Blueprint. Today we'll be unpacking modern threats, understanding fraud trends, and helping business leaders understand what they can do to minimize fraud and protect their businesses. Joining me today is Sara Seguin. Sara is the Principal Advisor of Fraud and Identity Risk at Alloy. Alloy is a leading identity and fraud prevention platform provider. Sara brings nearly 2 decades of hands-on experience in banking industry and with Alloy. Sara has deep-rooted experience within various fraud risk domains, including deposits, payments, online activity, cards, risk, and identity. Sara, welcome. I'm really excited for today's conversation, and welcome to Building the Blueprint.
Thanks, Steve. Great to be here. Thanks for having me. So as you mentioned, Steve, fraud and identity risk advisor with Alloy. I've been with Alloy for a few years, but prior to joining Alloy, I was in the banking world. So for about 17 years with large enterprise institutions. Most recently, I was with KeyBank before I moved over to Alloy and leading fraud strategy for the enterprise, a business analytics team as well. So, I can often say I've been in the shoes of many bankers before coming over to the solution side. But a little bit about Alloy. So think of Alloy as a fraud and identity prevention platform. So really what we try to do is help financial institutions optimize for growth, but while minimizing their risk. So really that protection while also helping to grow. So we currently have over 700 clients across enterprise banks, moving into regional, community, as well as fintechs.
So with that, Sara, let's jump right in and just go over the state of fraud. So one of the reports that Alloy produces every year, which is really fantastic read for everyone out in the audience, is the state of fraud. And this most recent year, the 2025 report, I would say really did a good job of capturing the ever-changing landscape around fraud, both from a perspective not just of what's new, but also what not necessarily has changed but might feel old. Why don't you just start by giving us kind of an insight into the overall fraud landscape, what you see changing, what you see evolving, and what the landscape looks like through your lens.
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. So that report that came out, what it showed was that fraud continues to increase. So it's probably not a huge surprise to many folks, right? As they receive the text messages, the emails, and they hear a lot about it on the news, right? Is that fraud is very prevalent. It is not going away. But what was captured in this data fraud report was that AI, right? So AI is not necessarily new. It has been around, but it is the impact it's making, the increase it's having, both from a banking perspective, a consumer perspective. So really that, I think, is what many folks are really thinking about is, whether it's the deep fakes, it's the voice cloning, there's some very real things that are happening, especially as it relates to scams. So we see those continue to be on the rise. And account takeovers, it's something that's been around for, goodness, a really long time, decades.
Certainly for as long as I've been in banking.
Right. It's not new, right? And if you think back, it was, for a long time, it was, contact center and digital, and now folks are walking right into the branch. And so account takeovers of even your hotel rewards accounts, right? It's prevalent, it's everywhere. And so I think that's not only top of mind, but also we still see that as a very common issue.
I would agree. And I think when you put AI in context, it's not necessarily that AI is trying to attempt to, have fraud in your business or your consumer account. I think it's the tool set AI gives the fraudster to try and create success on their end. And what I found very interesting reading this year's state of fraud from Alloy is the composition of what that actual looks like, who's perpetrating the fraud. I believe it's over 70% of fraud is actually directly coming from sophisticated organized criminal rings. When you put the amount of data they have from, say, the dark web in conjunction with tools like AI and the ability to create deep fakes, do you think that's kind of the evolution of where you see fraud going when you're looking through your lens on a day-to-day basis, where you see it headed into 2026?
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. I think you're spot on, right? And when you really think about that number, over 70% being reported, that's a high number. And quite frankly, I think it's, can be scary for some folks. But I think what I would point out there is it's not necessarily new in that whether it's consumers, businesses, financial institutions, they are being attacked, right? So you have that over 70% that has been happening, but now we have a number to it. So I think that's probably like the thing to call out. It's not that all of a sudden this year it's 70%. It's been ramping, but we haven't been able to really like quantify that number. And now we have over 70%. Now what that tells us and what we know is these groups are well funded, well organized. There are what you can see and what is public is these are groups that are, again, large, right? They have buildings where unfortunately these scams are taking place. But, what else I think that means is it helps us to understand on the solution side and the banking side what we're up against, right? And how we can look for certain things in order to look for those anomalies from groups, I will say, in order to really combat and help consumers and business owners.
Yeah, I love that perspective. And then when I try to think about it, when I talk to my friends who are business owners, I always keep it simple. I tell them the reason why we all get these fake phone calls or texts or emails is because unfortunately, at the end of the day, they're working to a success rate that keeps perpetuating them into the future. And I think when I look at some of the stats you recently put out, I believe over 80% of Americans worry about being scammed by some form of AI, whether it be AI performing the scan, detecting the scan, but involved in it. And I think the important thing there is for a small business owner to really start educating yourself around what that might look like, what that might feel like, and getting your team involved in that process as well so that you're able to identify it. I think one of the things highlighted in the State of the Fraud report is this concept of the imposter scam or spoofing. And I see some statistics out there that I believe it's not only the number one category in fraud over the recent year, 2024, but I believe it almost doubles the next category. So if you think about something that's being perpetrated because it's working, you're seeing that play forward in the spoofing or in the imposter scam profile.
As soon as they find that vulnerability, then they are going to hit it and they will hit it hard, right? And if they send out 100 messages and 2 are successful, well, if AI helped them to quickly and easily send out those 100, then 2 being successful may be worth it to them, right? So it's as they find a vulnerability, the AI helps them to hit it at a larger scale and faster. So I think that's where it becomes really important to be vigilant, second guess, right? As a consumer, a business owner, that really take a pause there. But I completely agree, Steve. I mean, spot on that it is here, that impersonation, it is real, and they'll continue to look for tactics and what can they expose in order to succeed.
And I know we're going to talk about some takeaways for small business owners later, but one of the topics is this generally tends to work from the studies I see because it's leveraging the element of trust and urgency. So these AI or learning machines are really building off the amount of data that's available in the public domain, whether it be spoofing a phone number, spoofing a voice, now spoofing video, or social media accounts to gain insights into how you might typically talk, how you might typically request something of somebody. So it's really leaning into not on the human element of all of us, right? Creating this false sense of urgency. To your point, I think you said earlier around, hey, I need this invoice paid or this wire done. The instructions might be different, but it's got to be done by 5 o'clock and it's 4:30. Please process it. And the concept there is really marrying up that core fundamental of fraud with the spoofing, the imposter, the phishing, to more technology-focused sense of urgency measures that, quite frankly, I think we as not only small business owners or consumers need to think about, just as in our everyday interaction with our own financial accounts, be aware of what's out there, how it's targeting us, what the expectation is, how they think we're going to react when we get these phone calls, texts, or emails. And that also ties back to knowing what your bank will or will not ever text, call, or email you for, right? So I don't know, Sarah, if you want to tell everybody, but I don't believe any bank in the country will ever ask you for your social security number, your account number, who the signers are via text, phone call, or email. So it's always knowing those red flags.
Yeah, it's hard, right? Because we're humans and we want to have a trust element of if our bank reaches out to us and they need our information, it's our money and we're concerned and we want to make sure that we comply so our money stays safe. But you're correct, Steve, that what institutions now have in text messages is we will not call you and ask you for this code, right? Do not share unless you have called us, right? And I don't mean call us because someone gave you the number. Call us because it's the number on the back of your card, right? And I think that's the piece of don't share certain pieces of information unless you know and you've verified that number and who you were on the phone with. But you nailed it. The human component. I mean, we want to trust. I want to trust everything I receive is good.
Yeah,
but unfortunately, it just isn't anymore.
So with that, let's maybe dive into some of the old trends. I'll say the legacy trends of fraud, which some might think don't exist, but the truth is they're actually still some of the highest growing categories of fraud. If you want to start with checks, Sarah, that's probably one of the bigger topics out there still today.
Yeah, checks like near and dear to my heart, right? That,
Yeah.
I think for decades it's been swirling. Every once in a public article comes up that we may eventually get rid of checks, right? But decades later, we still have checks. There are a lot circulating. The processing of those and how many, it's high. So when it comes to check fraud, it is what's old is new again type saying that check fraud has been around for a really long time. It's still around, whether it's checks being stolen in the mail, checks that, even if you've handed someone and then they lose it and someone else, received it, fraudsters creating counterfeit checks, that there are a lot of scams surrounding checks. Really long time ago, what someone said to me very early in my career is the minute you hand someone your check, think of all the information you just handed to them. Your account number, your routing number, right? I mean, it's your address. And then you remember back in the day when there used to be driver's license numbers on checks too. We would put driver's license numbers on checks. So, we've evolved to at least take some of the information off, but at the end of the day, it's the account, it's the rounding number, you have the check serial number. There's a lot of information and it makes it a really easy target. So, I say that I think know that it is still out there. And if you are using checks, to make sure you are checking your account. And the minute you see something that doesn't seem right, call your financial institution. Because when it comes to any of these scams and fraud, time matters. Time is of the essence, right? That the faster you can call and tell someone about it, the faster they can try to, stop the transaction and or recover the funds.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's time matters, and in some aspects, it's also a little bit of keep it simple.
Yeah.
Like I'll even admit it. Like if I need to send a check, I would maybe just say, let me drop it in the mailbox. Actually, you should take it right to the post office. Right? That's the best practice.
Right.
And I know it feels like, check volumes are down. I think on a numbers basis, check utilization is down 21% in the past 4 or 5 years. But the instances of fraud have actually doubled. So when you think about that, it's pretty amazing when you see a shrinking pool of checks in the system and a doubling of the instances of fraud.
Yeah.
That is 100% to me telling you it's a doubling down on what was old, because sometimes what was old still works or might work even more effectively. So it's really important, like you just outlined, Sarah, to really think through your means of payment and then safeguarding that payment and then monitoring that payment till you see it processed fully through the system. With that being said, Sarah, I know there's this concept you really want to talk about around like evergreen behaviors, maybe both from perspective of a fraudster and the small business. I'd love if you want to start from either. I'll let you pick, but I'm excited for what you want to talk about.
Yeah. So I think, you have evergreen behaviors and Steve, you said it, right? There's two sides of this. There's the, when we think, we'll start with the fraudsters, right? And we'll end on consumers on a good note. So on the fraudster side, think of, they've been around for a long time, the bad actors, and it's the things that they do that are consistent throughout schemes. So even if the tactic changes just a little bit, what will hold true is the sense of urgency. What will hold true is that you're not supposed to tell anyone. There are certain red flags that, but really, like, for a moment, you may even have doubt, but you try to get over it because you're trying to comply. And Steve, you said it earlier, like the verify, it's really, you're right. Like the trust and verify, like you can trust, but you need to verify. And so, certainly to not insert paranoia to everyone, but there are red flags. If it's too good to be true, it probably is. It's probably not real. Sending money so that someone sends you money back, just, these certain red flags, it just doesn't feel right. And so I think there's those behaviors from a bad actor standpoint that throughout the schemes, they continue to hold true. So keep an eye out for those red flags, and that will help you to be more vigilant. Then there's the flip side, right? There's the consumer, the business side, where the evergreen behaviors from a positive standpoint that you should have in practice. So when you think about protect and secure and being vigilant, the sense of urgency is always going to be risky. Again, don't live in fear, but be cognizant of safeguarding your information, protecting it, securing it. I know I'm sure we're going to get into, Steve, some ways to do that. But I think always exerting the positive behavior, and if you're a business owner, then use them on the consumer side as well, and then use them on the business too, right? Like make sure they're being used on both sides.
There are definitely universally applicable elements, both from a consumer and a business standpoint.
Yes.
And definitely going to get into it later. And I think from a standpoint of a business owner, it's being mindful not only of how you're trying to prevent fraud, but how you pass that down to your team, right? Because ultimately, we all depend on the teams we work with. So we got to make sure that we've got the right policies, the right procedures, the right practices to verify. And to your point, these evergreens are there because whether it's a new tactic or an old tactic, they just have held true because they tend to pull through results, unfortunately. But when you can apply those on the prevention side, it's a big positive because that prevents those potential, I'll say, I hope minor or not major losses from coming through. Let's go through some real world examples that you've seen out there from a business case standpoint and how you've seen these play out in any specific fraud type situation. If you had a couple you want to go through, I think that'd be great for the audience.
One I would share that is still common, has been around for a while, but it's still prevalent, still very common, is when, from a small business perspective, an employee of a small business, they receive an email from a vendor that they typically work with. So no red flags there yet. And it includes an invoice that they know they're supposed to pay, right? So they were expecting it. Normal email comes through, language looks similar to what they've received historically. The flag, though, is the request said, we have a new bank account. Can you send it to this new account and routing number? And so, unfortunately, what we've seen, I'll say run rampant, right, is that there's a sense of urgency to say, actually, you have to send this right now and send it to this new account and routing number. And that has been done, right? So the example I'm thinking of, we're talking $50,000 that has been sent. And certainly those amounts can go up and down, right, that we've seen. But the $50,000, the employee sends the money to the new account and routing number. And what they didn't realize at the time is the vendor's email was hacked, right? So the vendor comes back to them to say, you're late on payment. You didn't send the $50,000 you owe us. And they said, yes, I did. I sent it on this date. But unfortunately, the vendor's email was hacked. And so the slight change of the account and routing number, what that did is it routed it to the bad actor, right? And so it becomes this really challenging situation for that small business because it wasn't their email that was hacked, right? But they still sent out $50,000 and the vendor wants their money. And so they're put in a really tough predicament. That has been around for a long time, that business email compromise, but we still see it today, right? It's still very common. So that is certainly one to keep an eye out for, that if there is a change in remittance, a change in where it should be sent, really take pause. Don't call the number in the email, right? Call the number you have on file. Yeah. And talk through that with your vendor, because all parties involved would much rather talk through it and have a little bit of friction there than, be out the funds.
Oh yeah. And I would call that good friction too,
Yeah.
right? I would say that it's being effective.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with double checking, especially on a change of instruction.
Right. And Steve, I love that you called it good friction, right? Because I think, some folks say, well, friction is friction, but we expect there to be, as even consumers, we expect there to be, I think we're used to it, right? Like there's like we've been programmed to expect some friction, right? And so the right amount is the key there.
And I think too, when you think about fraud conceptually, there's always this element of traditional red flags. So to me, that's inherently responsive to the good friction element. Or you know what, these are the things, if you see, you should make a call back. It should be to the number on file. You shouldn't call a different number that was with the changed instructions. Like these are effective preventative measures to either prevent fraud or, you know what, let me just make sure this is actually a legitimate change, because that can happen too. We're not saying things don't change, but you should have a process in place where you verify those changes. Because even to your first real life example, I mean, you could substitute in a number of different scenarios there where it's the CFO's email is hacked, you've seen, or the CEO's email is hacked, or a Zoom call is spoofed by AI. So the instruction can come from a number of different angles. You have to be prepared internally, regardless of where it comes from, to have that good friction in place to make sure that you're preventing it no matter where it's coming from. So ultimately, that's the way you really stop it from ever occurring.
Yes, absolutely.
So I don't know, Sarah, if you want to go through one more real life example, you want to keep digging into the good friction topic a little bit, I'll give you a little dealer's choice there.
Yeah, I'll absolutely take a dealer's choice. I think what's interesting is for folks to hear cases, right? So I'll give another scenario that I think we see a lot of just in the, I'll say, banking and business world in general. And that's related to when you have a business and an employee, they tried to log into their business account. But when they tried to log into their business account, the login failed, right? It indicates the employee was locked out, and they notice they have an email, and that email states, it appears to be from their bank, stating that they are locked out for security reasons and they need to reset their password and click here. And again, things are lining up because they're thinking, my login failed. I cannot get in. I have an email stating that I need to click this link and reset. And as they click here and they go through the prompts in order to reset, they comply. They enter their username, their security questions, reset their password. What they don't realize at the time, right, is that this email they received, it wasn't from their bank. This was from a bad actor who now gathered their security credentials, a new password. They have the ability to go in and reset. The kicker here, right, is that the reason it was locked out to begin with is because the fraudster had tried so many times. They lock them out, right? And in some circumstances, we have seen malware from a business perspective. So if malware is on there, they know when they're trying to log in, and they can try to capture some of that information. Not certainly what that means is if the malware is already on there, then a link was clicked on, a file opened right prior to that. But those are pieces that, again, you may have expected an email, but it's the things start lining up. But did this come from your financial institution? Do you have even a line sometimes at the top, right? An email where it says, orange or red banner flag saying, do you want to trust this source? And you hover over and it's supposed to be from XYZ bank, but it's not, right? But you're like, oh, this reset password, maybe I shouldn't click on it. So I think there's that from an account takeover. They want to send the messages. They want you to click on a link. They want you to open files. And so being really vigilant about, did you expect it? If there is a lockout and you receive an email, is that email from your institution, right? Hover over without clicking on anything to understand, is this a phishing attempt or is this a real message from your institution? And or why were you locked out in the first place? Because, right, if it wasn't an action that you took, you might think, wait a minute, I shouldn't be locked out, right? And maybe that's then a call into your bank's contact center.
And I love that example too, again, because it's so universal to a lot of these various types of fraud. When you think about a small business, right, we get invoices how many times a day, how many times a week, how many times a month. We're constantly receiving emails and we're used to getting something, clicking a link, downloading a document, and we sometimes have to take a beat, just like you were saying there, and ask, why is this happening? Where is it coming from? If I even just hover over the link, does the link look legitimate? Do I know the sender's address? There's a lot of these things where like bringing it back to the basics tend to be the most effective ways to prevent them from happening. But I think something that we touched on earlier, which I'd love to get into now, which is like how we as a small business can build like an actionable defense network internally in our companies, is around this like sense of urgency and intimidation and account takeovers, and like how we can build the structure around a really good fraud infrastructure when we think about running the day-to-day in a safe manner to prevent these things from happening. So Sarah, like when you think about those examples and the state of new fraud and the state of old fraud that you already covered, and you put that in perspective of a small business that's maybe resource constrained from a workforce capacity, or people might be on vacation, whatever it is, things are moving fast paced. Fraudsters tend to try to take advantage of those moments. How do you think you can get people to start thinking about, wait, let me slow down before I act? What are some of the fundamental things that can protect my business that I can put into practice no matter what my size is, no matter what my bandwidth is, or how resource constrained I might be?
Yeah, Steve, and you're spot on, right? Small businesses, that some of them are running really lean, right? And so, which is great, but what else can they put into place as a playbook or a framework so that they feel comfortable in operating their business? I think first and foremost, and happy to share many specifics here, but I think first and foremost, it's the training of, this can happen to anyone, right? And that certainly don't think that you're immune to it, or if maybe you haven't seen it yet, but it doesn't mean that it won't happen to you. So really be cognizant and train internally. When I say train, I don't necessarily mean like someone has to go to an all-day training session. It's even, know these 5 things, right? And just, it's awareness, really. Know that these things are out there. So I think it's really important that everyone plays a role in a business and ensuring that everyone just has that awareness. But another key component is, I think, of dual authorization, and also recognizing that the business may be lean, but it really helps if you are sending money out, if you are making large changes in order to protect, and whether you decide maybe there's a threshold that you want to say, anything above a certain dollar amount, maybe if it's only when you're sending a wire, right, from a real-time perspective, maybe it's before you put a large check in the mail, whatever it might be, you set your tolerance for a business, but the dual authorization check of, hey, this is $100,000 and it's higher than what we normally send. I want someone else to check this as well. I want them to sign off. So we have 2 eyes of visibility. If, Steve, you said earlier, if you receive a message from your CFO and it says to hurry up and send this, and there's a deadline and I'm in a meeting and I can't talk, pick up the phone and call your CFO, right?
Yeah, no.
So I think
he's like, hey, there's a red flag. I won't ever ask you to do this, but if I do,
yes,
always pick up the phone and call me. And that's how we as leaders should be training the people, right, in our companies.
That you're spot on, right? And then it comes full circle of, setting that everyone is on the same page and in this together, that that's even good friction in your company. Again, doesn't mean you have to have a 5-layer process to get there to restrain you. But that awareness, maybe dual authorization, securing of passwords, levels of access. So when you think about your password, where a PIN code, is it 1234, or is it something that no one's ever going to guess? From a password perspective, password phrases, I would say implement this from a consumer standpoint too, in your personal life as well as your business, and use a phrase, and don't reuse passwords, and don't store them on your computer in case there's malware, because then folks can have access to that too, right? So the password component, the dual authorization, training, level of access. Does everyone in your business need the same level of access? Or does it make sense to have layers to help protect you? So those are a few things that really come to mind. But if I really had to narrow it down, Stephen, if I had to say one thing, it's don't be complacent, right? That really just don't get too comfortable. Just have that awareness, be vigilant, ask the question. And Steve, you said it, slow down and take a beat, right? That really just take a minute, pause. Do I need to doubt this? And if I do, who do I need to call to give me comfort to move forward?
Yeah, I think, Sarah, when we think about running a business, we tend to focus a lot on, obviously the business plan, strategic planning, what we think the economy is going to look like, demand, supply base. I think we also have to think about what the landscape of fraud looks like. Because like you outlined today, and like a lot of reports that Alloy produces, it's, to your point, an ever-changing landscape. So complacency, to me, I think you put it perfectly, because you can't just say, here's the 5 red flags you should always watch out for, and go on your day and process the payments. No, it's, you got to be aware of what's going on, how things are evolving, what's changing, what are the new types of fraud that are occurring within your specific industry or marketplace. And I love what you said, I think right there a little earlier, which is some of these are applicable whether you're a business or a consumer, right? They're just good everyday practices. Change your password, right? The old things that used to work still work. So don't get complacent. Don't forget to do them, but you got to keep on top of mind with what's changing out there.
That's right.
So, Sarah, unless you have any last thoughts for the audience out there, maybe a little glimpse into what you think is coming in 2026 and beyond.
Steve, I would say when we move into 2026, what I would say we're going to see is, I think we're going to see more volume, right, from a fraud perspective, and just, again, remaining vigilant out there. But I think moving into 2026, we'll see more sophisticated scams. We have a state of scams report coming out, and what that will show is what consumers are experiencing, and where they're frustrated, and what they expect to see moving forward, right, from their financial institutions as well. And so I think that will really help to frame, even where we're at from a consumer and small business standpoint, when you hear from consumers themselves.
Couldn't agree more. Well, Sarah, thank you for joining today.
Absolutely. It's been fun. Thanks, Steve.
It's been fun. I really thank everyone for joining another episode of Building the Blueprint. This is an extremely important topic. I hope you all really enjoyed it today. And as Sarah said, not being complacent is top of mind. So make sure you're all informed internally around what's going on out there in the fraud environment at large.